Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Hello and welcome to Center Stage, the South African Film and Theatre Podcast. I'm your host, Alastair King and Daniels, and with me as always
is the other host, Peter Bates. And Alastair, today we're talking about a fascinating topic. We're talking about the theatre of the mind.
The theatre of the mind.
Exactly.
What is that?
Great question. Okay. The theatre of the mind is an old term. It comes from radio jargon. Okay. And it basically refers to theatre that's created in the mind. Okay. So it refers to basically the techniques of creating theatre, but without anything visual. So purely using the imagination of the audience.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know if you're familiar with radio plays.
Yes.
Okay. A radio play is an exact example of what theatre of the mind is. Okay. So, you know, we were talking about, instead of like films and plays that are actually on stage, you're talking about purely auditory. Audio, exactly. So obviously that was really big that was really big before television.
Yeah.
Okay. And
in the heyday of radio.
The heyday of radio, yeah. So I think like a great example of it is 1938, The War of the Worlds.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. Orson Welles. And they broadcast the War of the Worlds, and it was so convincing that some people thought that the world was really being invaded by Martians.
Because they used, I watched something about it, and they used like specific locations as well. Like there was a town that they spoke of, and it actually existed. So like,
yes,
like everyone, like they thought it was actually happening in that little town.
Yes, so people were actually really convinced that it was a thing. So it's like the use of dialogue and sound effects and music and
effects.
Yeah, and effects to basically generate in the mind this idea. Another one, a South African version is, well, I mean, my parents got on about it. They used to listen to Springbok Radio.
Okay.
Which apparently, I mean, I'm only getting it secondhand. But squad cars, which actually, by the way, is really good. Yeah, they prowl the empty streets at night. Squad cars, which is like a police procedural, basically, but told completely auditory. And by the way, it's really, really good, and you should definitely listen to it. And you can find it on archive.org. It's basically the Internet Archive has got a copy of, I think, every episode of Squad Cars. It's really, really interesting. Yeah,
it's interesting about radio plays because then you can have these two different extremes, where you have War of the Worlds, which was a radio play. Like, yes. It wasn't real, guys. But they made it sound like it was news bulletins and primary source material that they were getting, exactly. Like on the ground stuff. And that was radio play. But then you get things like squad cars or just like any other thing, and that's like an actual, like a series that you can, you know it's not real, but it's still a series. But they both fall under the umbrella of a radio play.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's a versatile medium, like anything really. You know, you've got a multitude of stories you can tell. But I think what's really interesting to me is the fact that it's literally all in the mind. Yeah, so I think the power of the theatre of the mind is that it directly engages the listener's imagination.
Would you call, I mean, this is probably not the tangent you were going to go on, but it just came into my mind. Would you call, like, reading theatre of the mind?
Oh, yeah. I think it's quite similar in terms of reading as well, because it actually requires the active participation of the audience, or the listener, or the reader. So you are creating the world within your own mind, okay? So because it requires you to actually, like,
think,
do the work, like in brackets, in quotes, like do the work, you kind of are more engaged because you're like involved in the process of creating this world, which I think is really powerful. And I think that's why I think that's actually why it's
popular.
It's popular and it's effective because imagination requires participation, and participation creates memory.
Yes. And it requires you to be invested in the story as well.
Yeah, of course.
Because if you're listening to a story or you're reading a book, and then if you're just like scanning the pages and like reading in inverted commas, you're not like really investing in the book. You don't care about the characters, and it's like sort of a disservice to yourself.
Yeah, we've all done that where you've read like 4 pages and then you like look back and you're like,
what actually did I read?
And you look at the page and you're like, wait, what? How did I get here? Yeah.
I just think it's so cool to think that with radio plays and reading a book, what you think the characters look like and act and what this where they are, the sets, the scenery they're around is completely different to like what you think they are.
Exactly, yeah. I think have you ever read a book and then you've watched the movie adaptation and you're just like, no,
that's wrong.
This is all wrong. No, that's not how he looks. Nope, that's all wrong. I remember I watched, as a kid, I read Artemis Fowl because I mean every kid read Artemis Fowl.
Duh.
And Harry Potter and everything. And then I remember reading there was like a graphic novel. I didn't say comic book, I said graphic novel. It was a graphic novel, and like everything was wrong. Nothing aligned with what was in my head canon. Not like my head canon, my head canon. Okay, so head canon, your head canon is right.
Yes.
So it's like what is canon is like what really happened in that universe, and your head canon is like what you personally believe happened in the universe. Yeah. So in my head canon didn't align with the book, so I was like, this is not good.
It's like when it's.
It was actually jarring. Like it took me out of the story. My brain was like, I reject this, and I actually couldn't finish reading it.
Yeah, it's like if you read Harry Potter. She clearly describes Hermione as having frizzy hair. But because, I don't know why, before I even watched the movie, my mind just didn't see those words. So I just always imagined Hermione having like long straight hair. Like not frizzy at all. Yeah. So I read, when I was reading the whole books, that's the sort of image I had in my mind. And then you had Emma Watson, who didn't necessarily have frizzy hair. And then, you get this story about the stage play that she wrote, and they cast I don't know her name, but it was a black lady with frizzy hair, and she was and everyone was like, oh my word, you can't do that. It's you're changing what it is in the book, and people actually no, in the book it says the only description is frizzy hair and something else.
It's actually strange. I don't visualize characters. I visualize places and I visualize situations, but I don't visualize characters.
I do. But the point what I was saying is you have in your mind, you have such a detailed
you've got this idea
of what's happening, and even if it's completely wrong, even if it's not what the author has said or what the radio player has mentioned, if it gets in your mind,
it's there, and that's how it is there. For you. That's in your head canon. There's nothing you can do. Yeah,
it's in your head canon.
And then you can fire it into the sun. Okay, we're getting silly now. I often find myself corresponding, for example, a book will take place in a house, and then I will often correspond that to other houses that I've been in real life. Do you do that?
Yeah, you use places you've been to and people you've sometimes met, and you just ascribe them to this character or this place with this area. It's sort of like what you do when you sleep, when you dream. You might dream that you're in your house, and in your dream you're like, I'm in my house, this is my house.
Yes.
And then you wake up and it was actually a house you were in once when you were 4 years old. Okay. And you go, but clearly it's the same sort of thing where your mind says, this is how it is. Yeah, when I imagine this is how it is. And
it becomes so convinced of
that. Yeah, and you get so convinced.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes Radio of the Mind Radio of the Mind, Theatre of the Mind so powerful. What did they say? I forgot the guy's name. Something Allen. I don't know. He said, radio is the theatre of the mind. Television is the theatre of the mindless. Because, which is a major diss towards TV.
Yes.
Because, and I think you kind of touched on that as well, because you said when you're reading, you're actively engaged, but when you're watching TV, you're just passively receiving what is beamed at you.
Exactly, yeah.
And even worse, you're not critically engaged. So it's fascinating. I was reading the study about, they studied how compliant people are with new ideas depending on the media through which they encountered those ideas. They found that people that encountered new ideas or concepts via television were more compliant and more likely to agree with them than if they read about them. And they corresponded that because they reckon that reading requires more of your, it requires more engagement in your brain to process, and therefore it engages your critical thinking faculties more. And I thought that was very interesting because a lot of entertainment today is told through video. I mean, the proliferation of YouTube videos is intense, and I personally, I don't find, personally to me, I read to learn. I mean, I read, I learn by reading. So I don't find videos to be a very efficient way of transmitting information in a way that needs to be referenced, because in a book you can flip a page or go back a couple of pages, go to a specific chapter, but you can't really do that in a video. You have to kind of watch the whole thing. It's not really like random access. So it kind of lends itself, and it's kind of a lot more effort to find something specific in a video. So it kind of lends itself to being received passively rather than being actively grappled with.
Do you think that's why there's such a new a drive in, say, English classrooms for visual literacy?
What is there a drive?
Well, yeah.
Look, visual literacy. I mean, if you look at, I think you're right. That's a very interesting idea. Look, the way I always frame it in my teaching is that people out there are trying to make you think a certain thing. Okay, you need to be equipped with tools that enable you to notice what they're saying and decide whether you want to think that or not. So whether you agree with them or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I frame it in very basic terms.
Do you think that or not?
Well, because it's I always say you control what you think, and then people say, oh yeah, no, you don't, and then I use this example. I say, excuse me, please forgive me. I say, think about your parents naked, and then the person I'm speaking to always goes, and I'm like, did you think about it or did you stop thinking about it? And then they say, of course I stopped thinking about it. And then I'll say, so you can control what you think.
Okay.
Do you see? So, I mean, obviously that's a very extreme example to try and get the shock reaction. But you can actually control what you think. So I think, but that part of your brain requires conscious activation.
Which is why you need to learn.
I think it is something you learn, but it's something also that you don't learn by watching TV or YouTube videos all day.
Yeah. But I sort of think that I see this sort of stemming from this idea that people just assume what they see is the truth on a very basic level. Like, it's on TV, then it must be true.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What we need to start doing is teaching people that no, actually, you don't take things at face value.
Teaching people. Okay, yes, Mr. Educator.
Because like you say, when you read something, you have to process it because you're just seeing words on the page. So you gotta make it visual for yourself.
It goes through a couple of steps.
It's got to go through a couple of steps, and through doing that, you decide for yourself whether you agree with it or not. But with TV, or like visual medium, it's like right there, and you can go, okay, I'll take it as face value.
Or it's got to do with that, like,
go deeper.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, so it's got to do with that kind of like there's this ranking, like the immediacy. So, and it kind of goes into a bit of biomechanics and stuff. I don't know how accurate it is, but I remember reading it somewhere. They reckon that you react faster to sound than you do to visuals. That's why the starter's gun is what sets off a sprinter. Okay. Instead of like a flag or something, because you react faster to the sound. Because the sense of sound, or the sense of hearing, evolved sooner or earlier, and it's much more embedded into the brain. So then the sense of sight evolved later, and it's less embedded. It requires more like processing power of the brain.
CPU.
Yeah, exactly. Like it requires more CPU cycles. And then like critical thinking like evolved much later, and that requires a lot of CPU power. Look, I mean, I don't want to like crap on people who like, I mean, I love mindless television.
Me too.
Like I spend
Netflix, hello.
I spend way too much of my time watching mindless nonsense, like people doing silly things and dramas and whatever. And I'm not saying that, because I mean, you know, I'm not saying that people who watch movies are stupid or anything, because I mean, I watch movies. I'm not.
No, yeah.
I mean, even that, you know, even the concept of somebody thinking that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
To me. But I'm saying like, and I'm not saying that you cannot think critically about movies, because you totally can, and it's like its own art form, and there's just amazing things you can do with it. But at the same time, if you're looking at like mass media, you know, it's kind of cheapened. It's really cheapened. Yeah. And I mean,
you got to like, you can think critically, but you've got to actively want to.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, because I mean, you look at what happens with social media, Twitter and Facebook, and the ability to like put your thoughts out in a distilled, simple form in a way that provokes an emotional reaction. That's pretty effective at getting people to think something. But that kind of contradicts what we just said about reading, engaging the critical faculties of the mind. Do you see?
Ooh.
There's a little.
But I think
bit
it's different if it's like a long form thing. Then, because you know the writer has been writing this and they have this idea that they're trying to get through to you. But like a tweet or something is just like.
Well, they've also got an idea they're trying to get through to you.
Yeah, but it's how many words to explain a broad topic.
I think when a person's confronted with something, their emotions are activated first. And if all you're doing is activating the emotion, like I'm just thinking about Trump's. Oh gosh, I said the word. We should have like some forbidden words on these podcasts, like a big buzzer or something. Bop, bop, bop. It's like sad, terrible, bad news, you know, stuff like that. It's just like these big, bold, like emotional reactions. And I think if you can hit someone on an emotional level, you're not necessarily engaging their critical mind.
Yeah.
And you hit that first. So when you're only got 140 characters, I don't know, Twitter doesn't really have the character limit anymore, does it?
Yeah.
So when you've only got a short tweet or Facebook update or picture or something, you're hitting people in the emotions, okay? And that's more likely to get more of a reaction than, and then they're not going to engage that, like, hang on a second, critical think.
But also the hang on a second, critical think requires, like, it requires you to do a little bit of work. And like I was saying, if you're reading a book, there's a whole book for you to read with ideas.
Yeah, so you got time
but
to
like
get
a
into
tweet or like a Facebook update.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's like right there, and then there's nothing extra for you to.
You consume it in a second.
You consume it in a second. It might be like emotional, and then there might be like retweets or like comments and stuff, but there are also like small emotional things. So you're not getting like the content of it.
Yes.
And
the context,
because it's right there, and you can't easily get like you can't. There's not often a link to maybe a explaining video or to an article or something.
And you know what's even worse is that tweet is literally just a single line, or that status update is just a single line or whatever it is. And that is and then the only context you have for that is the context that you yourself instinctively create, because the brain is really good at that, which is necessarily divorced from the actual content of the tweet itself.
Yes.
So that's that's how a meme spreads,
yes.
Right? So what is, like, you know what the word meme comes from? You know, like gene is a particle of genetic information. Meme is a particle of like the mind, like the think, the thought, like a particle of thought that can like infest people. And wow, that's actually why it spreads, right? Because it's so, that's fascinating.
We have taken a very strange turn.
But that is why theatre of the mind is so powerful.
Yes.
Okay, so let's bring it back to theatre of the mind. But that's why theatre of the mind is so powerful, because it impacts you right there, and it requires your active participation. Have you? Oh gosh, what is the title of that thing? I was listening to a couple of episodes the other day. A really, really good. So it's also called, I think, if you want to Google it to find some really good ones, you probably want to look for narrative podcasts. That's what they call them as well.
Okay.
Welcome to Night Vale is an American one that's very popular. It's kind of got like a fantasy setting. I've watched. But do you see what I just did? I said watched.
You want to say watch.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's the word that I use to express the idea of
taking something
in. So I don't know, how much critical analysis. But again, because it's auditory, it hits you right there, and you've got that emotional connection. It gets your invitation, your imagination going. And the other one I watched was Alice Isn't Dead. Do you see I said watched again? So Alice Isn't Dead and Welcome to Night Vale. Those are two really good narrative podcasts. I really like those. And then if you Squadcast on archive.org is also really good. And just give it a go. I think to the great thing about it is that I actually prefer them to audiobooks.
Why?
Because it's kind of like
it's more like wham bam.
In a way, it's less of a commitment
theatrical.
to me. It's less of a commitment to me in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Audiobooks, I mean, I've never really understood audiobooks because it's just
I far
the author.
Frankly, I far prefer reading.
Yeah, it's just the author reading their book to you.
Well, not necessarily the author, but I far prefer reading, to be honest, than audiobooks. So, Alastair, I think we should tell our listeners of our little project we've done.
Yes.
We have actually recorded the first episode of a radio play for you, beloved listeners, especially just for you, which we're going to play for you next week.
Yes.
And what we did is we try to cram as many cliches into 10 minutes as possible.
Whether or not that was a smart idea.
It was definitely a smart idea. It sounds amazing, okay? It's a bit of a murder mystery.
Thriller type thing.
Like
mansion
butlers, jaded
crime investigators,
detectives.
That's the word.
Do detectives detect things? It was actually a load of fun, and we got a lot of help from the guys at Blended Audio who are doing the editing for us. Shout out to Stefan, who's put a lot of hours into it. But the first couple of minutes I've heard it turned out really well. So we're going to play that for you next week, so you can enjoy. And then go check out those. Go check out narrative podcasts or radio plays. They're really good. And thank you for joining us.
I was going to say we'll see you next week.
Yeah,
we're still on the same sort of visual.
You'll hear
idea.
us next week.
Yes,
in a little bit of a different format to what you're used to.
We will talk to you next week.
Exactly, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye. King Media Productions Centre Stage is a South African film and theatre podcast hosted by Alastair King and Daniels and Peter Bates and produced with the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.